What's up, middle school house parties? What's up, Motion? Before we dive into week 2, let me just take a minute and talk about last week. Last week's house parties were crazy. We broke records. We had more students in houses than ever before, which is exciting and so amazing to see new students step into houses, to see students who have been around begin to invite and bring others in. Amazing. We're so excited about what God's doing at house parties. We love all you new 6th graders, new 7th graders, new 8th graders, and of course, you returning 7th, 8th graders too. We love you too. Hopefully this past week, you begin to see your school a little bit differently. Hopefully you've been feeling differently about your school, your classes, practices, hallways, and the kids who fill them. Our goal is for you to not view your school as somewhere you have to be, but instead somewhere God has specifically placed you, and somewhere He placed you to make a difference, to have an impact for Him, to change things, to flip the spiritual climate there, to help others find a full life in Jesus. Because remember, Chaos is a movement, not an event. We aren't just house parties and rush. We're a group of students and leaders who are on a mission to flip the spiritual climate of Camden County schools. We want to lead disconnected and unfulfilled students to find a full life in Jesus. We want our schools and our county to be different. We want to make a difference because Chaos is there. And the way we're going to do this is by leading people to find a full life in Jesus like we have found ourselves. In rush and house parties, they're just meant to move the mission forward. This is why God has placed you right where you are. He made you for that moment, this moment, and the moment for you. He placed you at Camden County Schools, Camden or St. Mary's, to make a difference. And the biggest way you can make a difference is by living differently, like Jesus, loving those around you like Jesus loves us, by loving our neighbor like the Good Samaritan. We've been looking at this story that Jesus told about the Good Samaritan. You remember, there was a guy walking down the road, he got jumped and left for dead. 2 fancy religious guys walk right by him, they don't care, but his enemy, the Samaritan, stopped and helped him. Jesus told this story to help us know who our neighbor really is and what it looks like to love them. Last week, we talked about how we have to see those around us and we have to feel compassion for them. We can't love and care for people we don't even notice, and we can't love and care for people we don't feel anything for. Our heart should line up with God's heart for people. But the Good Samaritan didn't just see someone and feel bad for them. He took action. He did something. The Samaritan stepped in. In Luke 10:33, he says this, "But a Samaritan on his journey came up to him. When he saw the man, he had compassion. He went over to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on olive oil and wine. And then he put him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, 'Take care of him. When I come back, I'll reimburse you for whatever extra you spent.'" Okay, the Samaritan did a lot. He didn't just help this guy. He did one incredible selfless thing after another, even to the point where he had to go, but he was willing to pay more when he returned for a man he didn't know, for a guy who was technically kind of his enemy. He loved his neighbor well. He took action and did so much that people would have thought he was kind of crazy. But he saved this guy's life. To really create a movement and accomplish the mission Jesus has given us, we got to do the same. We need to see people. We need to feel for them, but most importantly, we need to do something about it. We have to take action. Love is our compassion for others in action. Because here's the thing. We want Chaos to be a movement. We have to do this. A movement requires action. Nothing changes unless we take action, unless we step up. A movement isn't really a movement unless we actually move. Just seeing people and feeling for people isn't enough. It's where we need to start, for sure, but it's not where we need to end. We have to allow it to motivate us to do something, to step in other people's lives and serve them. So now we have to figure out what exactly that looks like. What does it look like to take action for those around us? What does it look like to step up in the lives, to step into the lives of people, to step up and just serve them and help them in our schools? Students all over our schools are disconnected. They feel alone. They feel like no one's with them. They may be confused. They feel hopeless. And I think loving our neighbor can be as simple as spending time with someone we may not normally spend time with. We have to take the time and say, hey, ask how they're doing. Maybe we help a new 6th grader find their way to class, or we see they're struggling with their homework or a class project and we help them, or we sit with them at lunch or at the game. We invite them to sit with us. We're being a friend. We're showing and demonstrating that with our actions that we care. Being a friend can just mean we're listening to them, we're talking with them, we're helping them with school projects, we're being kind and encouraging or helpful or serving them. And by serving, we don't mean like a waiter or a waitress at a restaurant. Serving someone just means putting their needs before our own. It can look like sitting with someone we don't normally sit with, or standing up for someone no one else will, or helping someone else, even if it doesn't help ourselves. And this kind of friendship isn't very normal. A bunch of students treating others this way isn't common. So when people see it, they'll wonder why we are the way we are, why we're doing what we're doing, why we see people like this, why we care, why we serve, why we would do this. And we can point them to the why, Jesus. We can tell them about how everything changed for us after we met Jesus. How through him we learned we are loved, we are valuable, we are forgiven, we are changed, we found joy, we have a full life because of Jesus, and now we want others to have that too. We can invite them to know and follow Jesus. Taking action eventually leads to being able to invite others. But remember, it's not just about inviting people to events, it's about inviting them to a new life found in Jesus. And don't get me wrong, inviting someone to Rush or house parties or church Sunday morning is a great thing. We should definitely do that. But the mission is not to invite people to events, it's to lead them to Jesus. And the events can help someone know Jesus for sure, but how much more powerful is it if someone is living in a way that shows Jesus every day? How much more interested in Jesus would someone be when they have a friend who shows them what Jesus is like, when they see the hope and joy and love that he brings to your life in class or at practice or at work or whatever? So yes, let's create an inviting culture. Let's invite and welcome new people to Rush and house parties, but let's invite them by being a good friend. Because if we're seeing them and feeling for them and taking action to love them and serve them like a good friend, how much more does that invite mean? So here's my challenge this week, middle school. See people God has put in your school, put in your path, feel for them. And this week, take action for them. Be a friend to someone you wouldn't normally be a friend to. Talk to someone new. Make them feel like they matter, because they do. Encourage someone who's down or sad. Sit with someone who needs a friend. Help someone with their homework or who's falling behind. Stand up for someone who's being picked on. And then after you've been the kind of friend the Good Samaritan was, after you've helped them and served them, after you've loved your neighbor, then invite them. Then invite them to Rush next week. Invite them to come check it out. Let's take action. Let's love our neighbors, then invite them. And let's make September's Rush like the biggest chaos has ever seen, all because a group of middle schoolers took ownership of where God has them, loved the people God has placed in their path, and all because a bunch of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders were the kind of friends Jesus talked about when he talked about the Good Samaritan. We can flip the spiritual climate of Cameron County Schools. We can change things, not because of how amazing we are, but because God made us for this, and he wants to use us. So let's be a generation of students who take action, who start owning their campus, owning their schools, and living in a way that chaos really does become a movement. And then let's celebrate as God begins to use a bunch of students to change Camden County Schools.